Let's now summarize what we have learned and developed so far from the BMI calculator projects. So now we have, again, so you should always remember whenever you're developing a mobile app, we are following the model view controller pattern. Okay, so here we got a model view controller pattern. And the acronym for that is MVC. Okay, so now we started up with the view, which is the GUI components. And the main purpose for that is simply just to take inputs and then display output. And then there were three components that we used, right? If you try to recall the three we used. And the file to look for is under projects. You can see under app, under RESTful resources, under layout, and then activity bmi.xml. If you double click on that, you will see that, so that's the .xml file. And then for that one there, you can see that we got two possible views for editing the GUI design. It can be the design graphical view, which will show you the mobile screen that you will see. And also we got a textual XML view. Okay, so here is either design or text perspective. So in the design point of view, in the design perspective, you can simply just drag and drop the GUI components. And the three we used was the plain text view, and also we got button, and also we got the plain text view, the plain text field for taking inputs. Okay, so we got text view, button, and also text field. So these are the three we used. Okay, so now the view part simply just take inputs, and somehow it will be up to the controller to actually retrieve the input that's really being entered by the user. That's why we introduce another component over here called the controller. And which file is that? So now if you go back there, the controller is under Java, and then under EEC 1822, and then that's the activity file, Java file. Okay, BMI activity.java. So that's the something activity.java. Okay, so what's the purpose for the controller? It's going to retrieve inputs, and then it's going to convert input string to numbers when necessary, and also you can set the view, for example the text view over here, set the view to display answer. And you can see the computation is done neither in the controller nor in the view. Okay, so now we have seen controller and view. And one more detail before I show you what's the correspondence in Android Studio. And for the controller, the way you do the the way you do the trigger is to say you select some GUI components over here, and then you're going to set the onClick attributes to be the method that you define in the controller. For example, let me show you here. First of all, you can see that over here, if you go to the activity.java, you can see there is one method that we define over here, compute BMI button clicked, and then the parameter over here must be of type view over here. It must be the case, otherwise it cannot be selected. And now if you go back to the view over here, now the one we want to trigger some code, we want to attach some code to the compute BMI button. As soon as the compute BMI button is clicked, we want to execute a block of code, namely this compute BMI button clicked. And then over there, we actually can see that under properties for this button here, you can see the onClick attributes over there. Let's just scroll down a little bit. You will see onClick has been set to be the compute BMI button clicked, right? Okay, that's really how we link between the controller and also the view. All right, and then so that's about the two components. Now, if you go back to the controller code over here, I provided to you two helper methods for you to retrieve the inputs and also set the output. So these are the code you can just take verbatim, take for granted. You can always copy and paste these two blocks of code without any worries. You can just do the copy and paste. Now over there for the compute BMI button click method there, we simply just call the relevant helper methods to get our GUI inputs. And then we do the conversions over here. And then for the principle of separation of concern, we try to manipulate the model objects rather than doing the computation in the same controller. Okay, so now that's why we actually introduce another component over here called model. So this is really the key. So the focus for this particular course is mostly on the model, because the way you do controller or the way you program view are pretty much standard. There's not too much to learn, to be honest. But what's really going to challenge your mind to really grow you intellectually is really to train you how you can do modeling, how you can create object-oriented models in Java. So that's the thing we're going to focus on throughout the semester. Okay. So now the model over here is going to for separation of concern. And we already learned for the model we're going to apply the object orientation technique. Object orientation, where we have basically classes, attributes, and we have constructor, and we have accessor, and we have mutator. And then we also mentioned an important concept like context objects, method call, and also parameters. This is what you define when you define the methods versus the actual input you pass, which is called arguments. Okay, so now basically the controller is going to manipulate the model. Okay, and then whatever you and then the model is going to return some computational result back to the controller. That's how we do it. And then the controller is going to then in turn going to set the value on the view. Okay, that's kind of the model view controller pattern over here. Okay, so now another thing to say, we also created a tester over here for the model to say we don't want to wait until we complete the model entirely and then we do the testing. That's way too late. You want to do the test along the way you do the developments. It's called so-called test-driven developments. That's why we created this tester over here with a main method. One thing to note, you realize that the code that you actually play around over here is pretty much similar to what you did eventually on the controller. However, the way you run a controller is by connecting your tablets to the your computer and then launch the app. Okay, and the way you test about the tester, you can simply just launch it and then see the effect on Android Studio. So there's a fundamental difference over there. I'll write it down for you just in a moment. Okay, so now for test-driven development, we also have a small component over there called the tester. Okay, this is really for test-driven developments. So tester is going to test the correctness of the model. Okay, there's a small component we introduce over here to make sure you always test your model to make sure before it can be made use of by the controller, it's already guaranteed to be correct. Okay, so one more thing I want to mention. Let's think about what's the difference between controller versus the tester. Okay, so now briefly speaking, for our purpose, for the controller, first of all, what do they share in common? So what they really share in common is they both manipulate model objects. They might create a person object, they might set the person's weights, they might calculate person BMI, right? That's what they share in common. However, in the case of the controller, in order to test it, you have to connect the physical device to your computer. Okay. However, for the tester, it's not really for a formal release. So it's only just for testing the correctness. It's actually for TDD, test-driven development. It shouldn't be done. It should not be done in the last step. You may launch the controller in the final stage of your development, but you should really do the test-driven development along the way. So now here, no need. For the tester, no need to connect to any device. Just launch in Android Studio. And you can already see the programming effects. So as soon as you see that you're happy with how the model object will work in the tester, if you're satisfied with that, when you put a similar fragment of code in controller, they're guaranteed to work. So that's why the test-driven development over here is really valuable. Okay, so this is a very short wrap-up video for you to go over all the concepts we have gone through in this particular tutorial series. Do study this tutorial series very seriously and thoroughly, and ask questions if you have any, and it's going to help you for the rest of the course a lot.